Hi, and welcome to my channel, The Stitchy Wife. I'm Elisabeth, and today it is a first for me, a sew-along. Welcome to sew the Greer jumpsuit from Handmade with me. Hi everyone, welcome back to those of you that have been here before and supported me all the way, and very welcome to all of you new ones out there that I hope will find me through this and my coming sew-alongs. This is, as I said, my first one, so please be patient with me because I haven't quite figured out how I want to make them and how I can be of best use to you and share my knowledge of what I have learned sewing a lot of Handmade patterns and sewing mainly, well, I've been sewing since I was born. I was in my mom's lap. I was even in her belly, and that is the time when I was the she always said that she felt like I was doing my best in her belly once she was sitting in front of the sewing machine. That might have been an interpretation that she wanted to make, but anyhow, I like the thought of it. So I've been sewing my whole life, and I am turning 48 this autumn, so it's been a while. There has been ups and downs, of course, and those of you that have been with me know that I have had quite big issues with my health, so there has been a lot of ups and downs the last years. But sewing has been my main hobby all this time, so I picked up some tips. I always think it's interesting to see a sew-along, since you can always learn something new. Even if you've been sewing your whole life, you can always learn. And that is the amazing thing with our sewing community. We learn from each other, and everyone is so extremely helpful, and I love this. So welcome here, and welcome to my little sewing space in the world. I live in Sweden. I live outside of Gothenburg, and it is the second biggest city in Sweden. It's on the west coast, and yeah, I'm living here with my husband. And yeah, that was a little introduction to me. Well, let's get this sew-along started. I am planning on sewing the Greer jumpsuit, as I just said, and it is a part of my capsule wardrobe that I'm creating for myself. And I have sewn a few Greers before, but this one is in a linen viscose, and it is meant, I have taken inspiration from quite a few that I've seen on Instagram that is made in black linen, a viscose linen blend. And this isn't black yet, but I'm actually planning on dyeing it. But I thought it would be easier to make a sew-along with this fabric before I dyed it. So that is why it isn't yet. And maybe I think it is so nice that I don't even have to dye it. We'll see. But first off, what is Greer Jumpsuit, and what is Adrian, who is the owner of the pattern company Handmade, saying about the Greer Jumpsuit? I will insert pictures of her and the tester and the pattern and how it's looking and the sizes and so on while I'm reading. The Greer Jumpsuit is a casual, relaxed fit, one-piece perfect for drapery woven fabric. View A features a sleeveless V-neck bodice with bust darts and zipper back. View B is more laid back with overall styling and tie straps. Just want to put it in there that I'm doing view B now because I feel like that is the most summery one. Both view feature a dropped crotch and can be made in either ankle length pants or short length with optional large front pockets. Greer is perfect for lounging at home, gardening, running errands, or enjoying some time in the sun. Throw it in your bag for your next beach vacation. Let's hope we can get to the beach here in Sweden this summer because it is cold at the moment. So right now I would just love to sew a lot of hoodies, but I know that that is a summer module and summer capsule wardrobe. So I am keeping my fingers crossed and hoping I will be able to wear this. Otherwise, this is a great layering piece. I hope you've seen the sizing, because she has sizes 0 to 24. What you need to think about when you're choosing your size for this jumpsuit is that it is quite loose fitting and oversized. It isn't majorly oversized, but I am in between a 10 and a 12, and I'm going for a 10, and I think that is suiting me quite well. And I am actually a size 39 in the full bust, and the size 10 is 38, and the size 12 is 40, and I am 31 in the waist, and that is between 10 and 12 too, and I am 40 in the hips. So think about how fitted you want this jumpsuit, because it isn't a fitted jumpsuit, it is an oversized, I would say, a loose fitting at least. And you can see on the pictures I've shown you that it is quite loose fitting. And what you need to think about cutting out is this. I will show you what I have used, what pieces I have cut out, and then let's begin the sew along. I will start off by sharing what pattern piece you need for view B and what I have cut. First up is number 9 combined with number 2, and this is the front leg part of the jumpsuit, and here you have a connecting piece, so that will decide if you are doing view A or view B. So if you're doing view B, make sure you look where you have this with little X's on, and it also says tape the edge to the top of piece 2 here, and make sure you're taping it to piece 2 and not the back leg, because I've done that mistake. And front top is supposed to go with front leg, and today we're using view B, therefore we're using pattern piece 9 is going to be taped to pattern piece 2. Then you decide if you want to make shorts or if you want to make long ones. I am actually doing somewhere in the middle, because my fabric wasn't quite long enough for the long piece. So I decided to do, well, we'll see where they end up. I just left it as long as possible. But this you need to cut 2, complete a whole piece. And then you have, if you want your pockets, front pockets, you need to mark the pocket positioning. I most of the time wait to assemble the pockets until I have assembled the jumpsuit, because since I am 5'11", I'm not always liking the positioning of the pockets that the pattern maker is making me face the pockets. So I always wait until I've sewn because most of the time you can sew the pockets afterwards, and this is so big and so much ease that there is absolutely no problem whatsoever to sew the pocket on afterwards. So I will wait and mark the pockets. But if you are sure that this is where you want your pockets, please mark the pockets. Otherwise you need to mark this notch up here on your fabric. You need to mark this notch, this and this notch, because this is where we add the back and the front legs. This is the front piece. Let's continue with the back piece. Here is the back piece, and the same goes for that. You can see I've it will connect with pattern piece 1, but you don't, if you're using view A, you have another number than 10 here. But I'm using view B, so therefore I'm connecting pattern piece 10 to pattern piece 1. And I mark the notches here, up here. That is important, even though you don't think so. It is important for the strap placement. And then you have a side notch, and then you have a leg notch. Nothing in the crotch area. And nothing else to mark. Next up, I have cut out the pocket pieces since I had left. And since I am this tall, I've actually cut out for sizes 12 to 24, even though I cut for... the pattern is cut out at 10. So, yeah. But I know that I need this size on the pocket. What you need to do too is to interface this piece of the pocket. Here we have piece 8, that is straps for our jumpsuit, and you need 4 of these, and depending on your fabric you need to interface them. I will wait and interface mine, but there might very well be so that I need to interface them. But you need to cut out 4 of this pattern piece. No notches here. Then we have a small facing pieces. We have front facing and we have back facing. Both is cut on fold, and depending on your fabric you might need to interface this, and this is a piece I am going to interface, as well as top of the pocket piece. And she has written it out very clearly. This piece is supposed to be interfaced. It says here, fold line, cut interfacing above this line. So this is the first thing we're going to do. Cut interfacing for this, this and this. And if you're having sturdier fabric than mine is a viscose blend, viscose linen blend, you may not need this. But as I said, make sure to check how structured your fabric is, because it is good to have some structure on the... This is what's going to sit up here. Let me show you. This is going to connect with the front piece and the back piece, the top, and it's going to be folded over. So therefore it's quite important that it is getting a bit stable. So I always do that, especially I use quite thin interfacing, but interfacing nevertheless. Here we have some black interfacing, and I will speed up me cutting it out and ironing it on. Always remember to iron the interfacing on the fabric with the glue side to the fabric. I've done that mistake so many times. The dots, glue dots, is supposed to be on the wrong side of the fabric. Always remember that. Otherwise it will completely destroy your iron. Since my iron often gum up when I'm using interfacing, I fold the pocket over itself and just press so that it stays in place. Then I can turn it over, and then I won't have to deal with the fact that it is all gummy and gluey. Let me see here. You see, then we can do it like that without it falling off. And keep a bit of extra steam and press on that make sure to read how your interfacing is working. I will now change the camera angle. I usually do this, I forgot that. When I have ironed on the interfacing, I make a small snip here and here in the bottom of the interfacing on both layers. I have them on right sides together. This is how I know where to fold the pocket piece. You see, it is so easy once you can see the notches there. This is pocket 1. And pocket 2. There is a notch and there is a notch. And then we iron. Here we have it, pre-folded. Now all we have to iron is this. Facing 1 and facing 2. Make sure it's wrong side, meeting the glue dots. And then you have a little, you can see a little slope here. Can't even see here, I have it on my interfacing. I didn't create that slope very well, so I don't come up my iron. This is just to make it lay a little glued, so to speak. You see, now I can turn it around, even though all of it isn't ironed or pressed. And now I can press it from this side. And then I won't be gluing anything to my iron. I am actually planning on dyeing this darker. I think so, at least. So I'm going to sew with cotton, black cotton thread, so it will be dyed once I decide what I'm going to do with it. I also see on her fabric, on her pattern, that she says fold line here. Then she has a fold line there too, and that is so there won't be any raw seams exposed. So once you have pre-pressed that one, you see here you have it, that is the pressed. You will fold up to that pressing line, fold it over, and then you will press. Now you will have a clean finish even on the pocket. It probably says so in the pattern too, but I haven't gotten that far yet. You see, this is how it's looking. Here is the pre-pressed we did before. Now you turn it wrong side up. You have the pressing line there. You fold it up to that line, the raw seam, the raw edge, I mean, let's see, and you press. There is nothing more, not more preparations to do, so that is great. I will see about my straps, where that will get me, but we will start sewing first, and we take it from there. Let's get the sewing machine. What we will start by doing, I showed you before that this is my wrong side, and we ironed the pockets like this, 2 folds. what we now will do is turn the right side up. You unfold the pre-pressed thing you've done. Here you have the marks. What you now are gonna do is fold the first under, then you're gonna do it right sides together. So it will create a kind of accordion. I know this sounds weird if this is the first time doing it, but after you've done it once, you will never go back, I promise you. What you now are gonna do is sew 3/8 of an inch seam allowance all the way around this one layer of fabric. This will be a basting line on where you're gonna fold, but you will continue that basting line up and over this fold. And I will share with you later why and how it's going to turn out, and it's going to be a beautiful pocket thanks to that. We are now marking where 3/8, 1, 2, 3, where that will end up on my machine. And now we're taking our accordion and we start by sewing from 3/8 of an inch seam allowance all the way around. Here we have from that mark to my needle is 3/8 of an inch seam allowance, and I am using 3.0 stitch length, and here we go. And when we're getting to this fold, make sure you either pin it or hold it down, because you see the fold is coming close to the presser foot, so it's not shifting like it is now. I was a bit lazy, I didn't think I needed pins, but then you have to stop and redo it. Let's take the next one. And I will now share with you why this is such a great idea to do this folding thing. Here we have both of the pockets sewn, and you can see it wanting to fold like that, and that is actually what we're gonna do. See how we have sewn it? Now you cut those corners, the top corners, so you reduce some bulk up to the seam. There you see the seam, and there I've cut it. And now you're going to hold this and fold it under, and see, you almost immediately, with a little bit of shaking, and you keep on pressing this part. See what happens? You get a perfectly squared corner, and stick your thumb in the where we sewn, press it down to meet the thumb, and fold it over. And now you're supposed to not use your scissors, but as always, when I need it, I don't have it. You need a point turner of some kind. And now you see, this is wrong side. I'm gonna press this, but you see how nice and neat finish we get there. And then you just fold along the stitch line. I always fold a millimeter within. Here you have it. I'm careful when I'm pressing. You see, you have to just let it swipe over the first time. Then you just continuously fold under the stitched line, the line you just stitched and the seam allowance. Then you add some steam, use your clapper if you have one, and clap. Continue here. Fold over. This is very malleable fabric, so I make sure it looks straight. And I finger press, and then I go over with the iron and steam it like crazy. And clap it. And here we have it. As I said before, I didn't mark my pockets. I hope I said that. I didn't mark where the pockets should be on the jumpsuit because since I'm so tall, it most of the time doesn't suit me anyway. Now we put the pockets away till we are gonna sew them on the jumpsuit. We have now ironed both the pockets. And let's top stitch them. I'm gonna top stitch mine here before I add them to the jumpsuit. And as I said before, I'm not gonna add my pockets to the jumpsuit until I try them on. But I will show you how you're gonna do this if you want to do it as the pattern suggests. But first off, you top stitch this piece, and if you're unsure about where to top stitch, I would top stitch from the wrong side. That would look quite okay. If you have an okay bobbin thread or bobbin stitch, you will be just fine by sewing from the wrong side. But if you are having trouble with the tension or with your bobbin stitch, please try and top stitch from the top, because you will appreciate it once it's done. And you know that this is, since the whole thing that we folded under was 2 inches, this whole thing is 1 inch. So you just want to be a smidge to the right of 1 inch, and that is where you're gonna sew. I most of the time do it like this. I put the fabric that I'm gonna top stitch, I put it like this. I see where I want my, here you can see, now I change it back to the middle, the needle position. And if I'm following the inside of my presser foot, I will get a great stitch. So now I'm going to mark here with a tape like this. This is a very easy way to get an okay top stitching on, to do it from the right side. Here is the edge, and here is where I'm gonna sew. So I'm just a smidge of 1 inch edge, and I'm keeping this as a reference point. Markers, painter's tape is a fabulous thing. And I'm using black top stitching thread because I'm gonna dye this one black. Let's position our pockets, and as I said before, I usually don't position my pockets until I am almost finished, because since I am so tall, the pocket positioning from the pattern maker's point of view most of the time doesn't adapt to mine. But we will see. I could at least mark it and maybe not sew it. Yeah, I could baste it now so I can share with you how to do it. So we have our front piece, number 2, front leg, and top front, and here is the pocket positioning. Let's mark it on the leg at least. Take one leg at a time so you don't confuse yourself. You have it right side up, since the pattern piece, when it's right side up, it is the same. And try and position it using the notches. If you have, like me, but a slippery fabric, it will be distorted. As you can see here, for example, I'm using this as a point. The crotch point is laying flat. Where is my notch? My notch is, I have to stretch a bit, and then you can see the fabric is off. Then you have to positioning it right, because this is cut on the bias, so it will shift, the fabric will shift. And here we have the pocket positioning. What I normally do then is to put a pin in the position mark, and I can feel that it is going through the fabric. You can feel it if you nudging like that. They are telling you to start off there and continue on this, on a line. The line is here, as you can see, so you should follow that line, so to speak. Let me show you here. Here is where the pocket should begin, and then you should look for that straight line and follow it while you're positioning it. You have a few methods you can use. You can trace it with a tracing wheel and a tracing paper. You can do it like this. You put a pin in the first circle, then you follow that straight line, and as you can see, you're almost ending up in the seam allowance here, and that is of course because I made a bigger pocket. Now I get it. I'm sorry, I'm confusing you. Yours will be at least like this. Of course you can't point this, it depends on your size. That is why I can't show you. I'm sorry. So I will in fact pull it in a bit and see where it ends up on me. What you can do now is put a pin down here and feel that it is going through both fabric and pattern piece. And you can take away the pocket and you hold tight there, and you open up so you can see where. You see here, I will zoom in for you, and you lift like this. Here you have it. Here is one mark and here is one mark, and then you can put 2 new pins in there, like so. And there is where the pocket should be. Now you take the pattern piece away and the pins. Remove it, and you will add your pocket like this. You could sew this. You could top stitch this now. You could hold this up to your front body and see how it is working, and see if it is okay to have your pocket here, or you can do it like me and wait. I know it will be a bit trickier, but it is worth it. That is a decision up to you. If you want to keep it there, then you pin it and you just sew with 3.5 stitch length, and you sew 1 U all the way around. Start there, go down, turn, and go up, and you make sure you reverse so you get it really stuck there, so to speak. I even sew a small triangle there sometimes. I will show you when I am sewing my pockets. I will insert here at what time I'm sewing my pockets. You can see how I'm doing it. So I won't be bothering with marking my pocket anymore. I will put them aside and wait till later and see if I want them, and if I might want them as back pockets instead, because that is an option too. You can decide by yourself whatever you like. I will keep the pins here so I can see later on if that is a place for me to have them on. So don't worry about those. Let's see what we are supposed to sew next. You start at the crotch point and you either serge or zigzag this on all 4 pieces, both your front pieces and your back pieces. The same from the crotch point and up. You finish that with either a serger or a zigzag stitch. I will serge my edges, so I will go over to the serger and I will get back to you once I have done that. And just make sure, if you are serging, don't trim away any fabric, because you need it for the seam allowance, otherwise the seam allowance won't be correct. Here we have it, all 4 pieces. This is the back pieces from crotch point and up, serged, and here are the front pieces, both of them serged from crotch piece up to the bib. Now we are gonna lay each back piece right side up, lay each front piece right side down on top of them, matching side seams from underarm to ankle hem. Pin the side seams together. So we're not going to bother with a crotch seam. We are going to change places on this, so to speak. Yeah, we're going to... Here we have the back pieces. This is wrong side up. This is wrong side up on the front pieces. If you take the crotch point on the back piece and you take the crotch point on the front piece, you match it together, you put a pin there, then you know that you have 2 crotch point, one of each, one front and one back, that is right sides together. Then you know that you have the right sides, so to speak. Put it away, then you take the other crotch point, back piece, and you put it right side together with the front crotch point, and you put a pin. This pin is just temporary, so we can figure out which piece goes with which. And take the back side in the bottom, because it's a bigger one, and the front piece on top. And you see, here comes the crotch point that we just pinned, and we are now going to pin the side seam. And now the notches are important. We had 1 notch on the side on the back piece and 1 notch on the side on the front piece. Connect those 2. Then you connect the underarm point. See? And here I have the leg notch. I will show you more clearly once I've done it. Now we have it here. I hope you can see this okay. Try to match the side seam, match the seam, the pieces I mean, of course. So the bottom isn't way off or so. This is gonna lay right sides together, and just pin as many pins as you'd like. But what's important is that you start off with the underarm point, which is here. You match the notch, the first, which is the waist notch. Then you have a leg notch, if you're not doing the shorts, because they are cut off somewhere here. But you see, this is supposed to do like this, because the back side is bigger than the front side. Front piece, I mean, and that is important to know. Let's do it. Now we have pinned this one, let's pin the other, and then we sew them. This is identical, just the other side of the other leg. All the seam allowances on this is 1/2 inch, so remember that. Let's sew the outer side seam on both leg pieces. We are now gonna sew with, for the rest of the jumpsuit, we are gonna sew with 1/2 inch seam allowance. I'm gonna take this away, this tape, and I'm gonna put it at 1/2 inch. So let me check where 1/2 inch will end up on my machine. That is that mark, and I will put that where the needle is situated now, and then of course I will end up in the middle of the marking there. This means I have to move the needle to as far to the left as I can, possibly can. Then I will end up with my needle position here, and I can follow that line. And then I will put a painter's tape down that line, so I know that that is the line I'm going to follow. And then I will get 1/2 inch seam allowance. I always think I will remember these things, but I don't. So I always make sure I use the tape, just in case. Let's sew. We are gonna start from the underarm seam, underarm point I mean, and just make sure that the fabric doesn't shift, or yeah. Let's start sewing. I will use 2.5 point stitch length now, and remember to backstitch. Now we have serged or finished the outer side seam. The side seam only have one side seam, of course, and I've overlocked mine together, as you can see. And I think I'm a bit I don't know the English word for this, but when you do something a lot in another occupation or something like that, it becomes a habit, and from it's a quilting habit of ironing everything, so that is why I'm doing it. I'm just ironing on top of the serge hem. Now let's see where to continue. I'm guessing that we are sewing the inseam, but let me check. We are now gonna sew the inside seam from the crotch point and down on both legs. So now we are turning it into two leg pieces, two closed leg pieces, so to speak. So this, start from the crotch point and down to the hem wherever you have it, on both legs, with one we have a notch here. I'm sorry, almost forgot. On the inseam there is a notch if you're not sewing the shorts. You have a notch down here on the inseam, and remember to start from the crotch point and sew down. let's get over to the sewing machine. Now we're gonna sew from the crotch point. We have the back leg piece here and the front leg piece here. And we are gonna sew with 1/2 inch, with 1/2 inch seam allowance is the way you say it. It's a bit tricky when you're gonna start here. You have to be a bit fiddly, but to get the fabrics to lay correctly. But start slowly. Back stitch. Check where you pin. And off we go. Here we have it, inseam finish. We'll just give it a quick press. This is not necessary since you are going to press them later on, but yeah, as I said, I'm used to it from quilting, so I will probably continue to do that. Here we go. Take this ironing mat away. Now comes the only somewhat tricky bit. We have, let's put it together, let's put it the way they are supposed to lay later on when they finished. Here we have the front piece, here we have the back piece, and they are facing each other. Right sides together, and here we have the other. This is the front piece, since this is smaller, as you can see. Two back pieces are sticking through, so to speak. What we are now going to do, we're now going to take one of the leg piece, or one of the body pieces, so to speak. Turn this right side out. Let's do it with the right side. It doesn't matter. One of them, not both. And here we have it. This is how it's looking, right sides together. This is the back side now. Now it's the back side up. What we're now gonna do is you're gonna open up this, the one that you are having wrong side out, and in that you are gonna put the right side one, and you're just going to put one leg in the other, so that you will end up with two right sides together. The inseams should be laying flat against each other, and the crotch point should meet. Always think that the crotch point is important to meet. You see, here we have it. This is both legs inseam that meet at the crotch point. Trickier than that, it's not going to get. And now, before you do anything else, you put the seam allowances, you separate them, if you can see how I'm doing it. I'm putting one seam allowance to the left and the other to the right, and I pull them as close together as I possibly can, so that these two seams that you can see on the right side, that they meet. No one is going to look in your crotch, hopefully. But you want it to meet there. And now we're just gonna make this, you're just gonna shake a little, and you will see what happens. As long as you keep on to the crotch point. Make sure you hold the crotch point and maybe even the hem of the legs, like this. then it's gonna fall into places. And it is amazing, because now we're gonna sew the one that we prepared before with that we serged or zigzagged one piece at a time. This is the very long piece we're gonna sew now. So we're gonna sew through the crotch point. We're gonna start at the back middle point that this is. Gonna pin there. You're gonna sew, follow this whole seam and sew with 1/2 inch. Continue around the crotch, continue to the front, and sew all the way up. So what we now are doing is sewing the middle point, the middle seam, the seam that is going through the middle, all the way through the middle. So we're going to go through the crotch point in the middle. Going to start at the top, at the back. Can you see it? And the most important thing is that you are right sides together, because if you aren't, go back to where I began to explain this crotch point meeting and start all over and see where you've gone wrong, because it is very important to have right sides together. Otherwise you're going to have one leg with one and with right side out and one leg with wrong side out. Believe me, I've done that too. So let's just put a few pins in, and I will try and turn it around so you can see what I am doing. But Mum taught me that if I always make sure that I get how the crotch points should look, then you most of the time figuring it out. So this is what we end up with. This is the middle of the back, and we sew that. Here we go between the legs to the crotch point, and we go up the front and up to the bib in the front. And this is going to sew straight line, straight stitch, 1/2 inch seam allowance, and I will meet you back here. Let's begin in the back and sew the whole crotch seam, so to speak, with 1 inch, 1/2 inch seam allowance, sorry. And make sure you backstitch in the beginning. And we have sewn the jumpsuit together. Can you believe it? It wasn't harder than this. It's time to turn it right side out. Yay. And see if we got it right. It's always what you end up with now. It's one leg in the other. That is why it's so exciting. But you see, you get it wrong side first. And then you turn it around. And here we have it. I am actually going to put on the facing and the top facings and my straps before I see where the pockets are supposed to be, because I think I need to know how long I can have them if I'm going to put them in front or back. So let's see. Adrian wants us to iron this, divide it in half, no, but iron it apart so that the edge here will be a lot crisper. So hang on a minute and I will get my... I don't know if it's easier to iron it using sleeve border or something like that, or wrong side out, but I like seeing my You know what, I realized that I forgot to tell you that we need, oops, something fell over. We need bias binding, of course, for the arm's eye, and I have made that already. I will make a separate video on how I do continuous bias binding. I know there is a lot of other ones out there, but I thought why not do a short one that is all mine. Then I know I can refer to it and be sure it is one where I tell you it is. So it's so easy to do. So here you can see the critisim. This is a bit further in front, and this means, look, we are getting there. Yay! Let's see what's next. We are now going to create the 4 straps needed. Here we have our strap pieces, and what we are going to do here is almost like bias binding. It is bias binding actually. You fold it in half. Then you open it up. You fold it in half, wrong sides together. I forgot to say that. Wrong sides together, you fold it in half. Then you start folding this half piece. You fold it to the middle of the pressed line. And then you press. That was hot. I have to turn off the heat for doing this on screen. You see? Now you turn it around. Do the same thing on the other side. See how this is pre-pressed? You have 1, 2, 3 lines. You fold it together, fold in the edges, and then fold it one more time. And there you have a bias binding or a strap piece. And then you top stitch it. Just press it one last time with some steam on. And you use your clapper. Here we have it. You do the same thing with the other 3, and then I will be back. Our final step with these 4 straps is to fold one end of each 4 of them under. You see, you open it up and you fold it under, and then you use the pre-folded marks to fold it back like that. And you press. You could leave it raw and just tie a knot. I want to finish it like this. Hope you can see it there. So now I'm going to top stitch all 4 of them. I'm just going to sew a line here where I folded it. I'm just going to sew a line here, and then this side where it's open. That is all I'm going to do. I'm not going to bother with sewing it all the way around, because I don't think it needs that. Because this is just straps. Remember that. I will speed this up from the raw end, because then I can control it a bit better. And I am going to follow this line instead on my presser foot, because then I will get quite far out, and I will increase the stitch length to 3.0. And here I don't even have to backstitch. I do it like that, so I'm sure that it is secure. Four straps finished and almost a jumpsuit. Let's see, we're now going to use 2 straps in front and 2 in back, and we will start with the front facing because it's easier and it is in front. I know that this is the front mainly because I still have a pin here from my pocket thoughts, so to speak. Where Adrian suggests you to. We now have 4 straps. Yay! Let's put them away for a minute, and we need to get the facing pieces and see what we are going to do with those. Here we have those, and the shorter one is the back one and the longer one is the front one. And you can see it doesn't differ very much, but this is the front one. And the one, you see that there is some angling to it. What you're going to do now is pre-press that angle, and that is 1/2 inch seam allowance all the way here. Just fold it under. And I love pre-pressing things, if you haven't realized that. So let's do that before we attach it. Let me see where we have it. Here is a very small, you can see on the pattern piece it is this one, and here it says fold line. You just fold it under. You could baste it if you're unsure of how much 1/2 inch is, but it isn't that important where you end up with this, because this is just so it won't fray. So I will do it a bit freehand. I will compare it to that and fold it up like that and finger press. You see how I do it? And that way I know I will keep approximately the right one. And here I just, because it's nothing important. It is just so that the fabric and the facing won't fray. Now we do the same thing with this, and you can see here I've angled a small bit. So we turn it over and we turn that over just like we did with the other one, and we finger press, and we get a mark of where to iron. Since it isn't something that anyone else is going to measure, this worked out so great I could turn it around. I finger pressed that one better. Here we have it. What's left for preparation for our facings now is just to make a notch in where the mid point is. I already did that on this one. Here we have the front facing piece, and I clipped a little notch here. I will do the same with the back facing. Let's fold it together like this, stretch it out, and make a notch where you still have a raw. That is important, where the raw fabric is, not the folded, because then you distort the folded piece. Here we have it. Let's get the jumpsuit. Take away the iron mat and let's get our straps and our jumpsuit. And now let's start with, let's see what we end up with. We end up with back. You can see which is, if you get hold of the crotch seam, I don't know if you know this, but if you get hold of the crotch seam and you pull, then the back is the longest, always. Not always, but in this case and most pants. Otherwise it's a stranger design feature. Not stranger, but a design feature. Here we have it. The front is always a bit shorter. And since we want the longer facing piece in front, here we have it. And here we have the middle point. What we're now going to do, this is going to be attached right sides together like this. Gonna try and zoom it in for you. I hope that helps. Here is the top. Maybe I fold the back side under, so don't be confused by that, but so it's easier for you to see. Here we have the front bib. You take your facing, you put the notch from the middle notch in the middle seam there, and you put it like this. What we are now going to attach in between this facing is our straps. So what we are going to do now is take two straps. We're going to make sure that is just that I prefer it like that. The seam that we just top stitch is going towards the arm size. So this, here we have it, is going like that, and the same for this. And what is also very important is that the raw hem is up towards the facing. What you're now going to do is carefully lift your facing piece, just the facing piece. So this strap ends up between, sandwiched between your front bib and your front facing for the bib. And you can't go further out than this notch. You should just be a tad in from the notch, just a smidge really, and then you let the facing fall back, and here we have it. You see, here is the strap, and here is the facing piece, and here is the front piece, the front bib. Let's put a pin here and I will show you with the other one again. We put a pin in the midsection here to where we have the seam that meets the notch that we cut. Here we have it. Then we take the other strap, having this seam facing towards the arm side, raw hem here, seam facing the arm side, lift the facing, opening it up so to speak, so that you could put the strap in between. And here we have the notch on the bib. This is the front bib, right side, and here is the notch, and just a smidge in from the notch you put the strap, and then you let the facing fold over, so the strap is sandwiched between. I will try and show you once I'm at the sewing machine. I think I'm going to sew this. First I thought about doing the back, but I think I'm going to sew this so you can see real close up. The back is made the exact same way, but just on the back bib. You see, we sandwiched the straps in between. Here we have facing, front facing, and front piece, front bib and front bib facing is facing right sides together with a strap piece in between. And this is how it's gonna, hope you can see it. This is the bib, this is the notch, this is the strap, and this is the bib facing. And here we have it again. Front bib, bib facing, front bib facing, and the strap in between as a sandwich, just close to the notch. I reverse over the strap, just to be on the safe side. What we now are going to do while we're sitting at the sewing machine already is we are going to take the front facing and we are going to fold it back, and we are going to under stitch the seam allowance to the facing, and the strap is gonna go towards the bib. So you see how I'm having it, and here is the seam allowance. So I'm just pulling my fabric so I don't get any seam allowance towards the bib. That way it will always choose, and there choose to go towards the bib. And here you can use whatever stitch length and how close you want. You can go by ear, not by ear, by eye. I will show you once we're finished. Make sure the seam allowance is laying towards the facing, towards this here. Here is where the thick part is. Here is nothing. I don't know why it's getting that, why it's working like that, but it is working extremely well. Here we get to the strap again. You keep the strap towards the bib and the seam allowance towards the facing, and you understitch. Now you will see. Now it kind of by itself is folding under. And it is amazing. I don't know why, but it is working. See? Now let's do the same thing with the back bib. And the front bib is finished. Can you see? Here is the understitch line, and it has captured the seam allowance wonderfully. Here is the facing, and the straps is trapped in between, like a sandwich. And now, because of the understitching, the facing want to fall to the right side. You see, I don't even have to iron it, and it doesn't show. And it is a great thing. Great. I don't know who came up with that, but I'm loving that. Now let's get to the back bib. Let's hide the front bib in the pants, and let's go to the back. Please don't look at that iron stain. That is interfacing gone wrong, so to speak. Look, we have our straps attached, and all we have to do is iron them where they want to be. The facings want to be. Iron down the facings. And then all there is to it is bias binding on the arm side and hemming. Yay! And adding pockets if you like to. I can't believe we almost did it. It is a bit late for me though, because it is almost 10 o'clock in Sweden. So I think I'm going to leave it here tonight, because yeah, I'm a bit too tired for the bias binding. And start with fresh eye in the morning, and we will finish these and maybe dye them so you can see the end result. Or maybe not even dye them, I don't know yet. Let's meet here tomorrow and we will continue this. Okay, welcome to a new day and finishing your Greer jumpsuit. Where did we leave off yesterday? Good morning everyone. It's time for a new day and it's time to finish our Greer jumpsuits. First off, what I realized yesterday, just when I finished filming, was that in the instructions, Adrian doesn't understitch the facing, the bib facing, until after attaching the binding piece. But that is just fine. I just wanted to mention it because I always do it like this, because it's easier for me like this. So just know that that is why we are not doing it the same way, Adrian and I. So if you're reading the instructions at the same time you're sewing, this is why it's not coordinating. What else I forgot yesterday was to show you the binding piece. And she has a pattern piece. For version B, you use pattern piece 6, and you cut out a fabric on the bias. That is the most important thing, the grain line here. I will insert a clip where I cut out bias tape using Adrian's method, because it is a bit different than other pattern makers I've been using. At least I've been using. Maybe this is a common method in some pattern makers, but I haven't come across it before, and I think it's by far the easiest way of doing binding, and I like the neatness of it and I like the look of it afterwards. So I will be doing this all the time from now on. But I will insert a clip here and I will be right back. Let's do the binding pieces for the Greer jumpsuit, and this is applicable in a lot of the binding versions on different patterns, and when you are quilting, and you use binding a lot when you're sewing, if you like that kind of finishing. But what is most significant for binding, it needs to be on the bias. That is why it's called bias binding. And as you can see here on the Greer jumpsuit pattern piece, she actually included the pattern piece. A lot of pattern makers just tell you how long and what width you're going to use on the bias binding, or you can use your own preferred width. So it's all depending on that. But if you follow this, you have a specified piece of pattern piece. So it's easy. The only thing you have to consider is that you can't do the binding normally. When we do something on fold, for example, we just fold it. Sorry for all the fluff. And then we put the pattern piece like this. Now we have to follow this grain line, so to speak, and put it like that on the bias, a 45-degree angle. And if you have a cutting mat, I have, for example, here is this angle is 45 degrees. So then you either put your fabric on the straight here and put a ruler following these lines. And you see, then you get 45-degree angle, and doing so you get some mechanical stretch in the fabric. Sometimes you get quite a lot of stretch. I will share that later. But the main thing first is to make sure you cut this binding piece on the bias. That is 45-degree angle from your selvage. And that is the first thing to remember. What I often do is to cut a continuous bias binding when I get some fabric left over, some cotton fabric or somewhat thicker viscose fabric, because it's so good to have on hand. And since I learned this French bias binding through Adrian, I do it all the time because it is so much easier than the old way of doing bias binding. So I will start by sharing how we do the bias binding using this pattern piece, and then I will share with you how I do bias binding so I have it on hand every now and then when I need it. But first up, we use this pattern piece. It is number 6, and on view B that we are doing today, we need it under the arms, so you cut 2 pieces of this. It's a long one. I usually measure it so I don't need to use this pattern piece. I just can use my ruler, but that is up to you. This is about 31.5 inch for my size. And let's see how wide it is. It is 1 inch and 3/4. But that I will check later. I start off by taking the fabric that I am gonna cut from. I put the selvage edge, or I look at the grain line on the fabric and put it along one of these lines here on the cutting mat. Or just make sure that I'm following the line. And then I take this, and if you don't have a cutting mat, you could fold it like this, so you get the 45-degree angle, and then you press it, finger press it, open up, and you see, then you follow this line and cut it out like that. As you very well can imagine, this creates quite a bit of waste of fabric if you're doing it like this. So most of the time you don't have a whole piece of fabric to get it a full length. Then you need to do it like this. Let's cut 2 pieces of this, and I will show you how you connect them, because it isn't tricky at all, but you either draw a line or you print it, or you cut it. Here we have the first piece. Now we put the pattern piece next to that one, and now we don't have to check the grain line, because now you know if you follow that on this, you can follow this pattern piece beside. Just put it beside it, and then you know that this will be a 45-degree angle. And you could continue to cut it like this and sew it all together to have a long bias binding, and to use scraps like that. That is what I'm doing, but I'm doing it easier. So we'll share that later. Here we have it. Now we just double check. I fold this in half so you can see what I'm doing. Here we have the half piece, and here we have the two pieces, so this will be enough. If we sew these two together, what you now have to do to sew it together is you can't sew it like this, because if you do it like that, this won't be on the bias, so it will stop the stretch. It is weird, I know, but trust me, I've tried it so many times and I failed every time. Now you place one of the binding pieces like that, and then you put the other one like a cross over. You see it like this. So here you have a 90-degree angle. I can admit to that. You see, this is a cross. You keep it as close as you can to the edge, but there will be some waste there. And then you take a ruler and mark it. I promise to help you. You go from, I will try and zoom in. You go from this corner to that corner, and you draw a line, and that is where you're going to sew. I will put a pin in and share with you what's going to happen. Look here, when we put a pin in here, following the line, and pretend you're sewing that. When you're finished, you can fold this over and you will have a continuous bias binding. Isn't that great? I will go over to the sewing machine and sew this and come back and share with you what I've done. Here we have it, sewn together like that. There. And please lay it flat and look that you get the seam the right way. If you have a fabric that is wrong and right way, this fabric doesn't matter since it is the same coloring both sides. But if you have different patterns on each side, or a pattern on one side and a single one color on the other, please just check so that you get the seam on the correct side, because it is so easy to get confused. And if you have maybe a patterned bias tape that is, you want the patterns to be in the same way and so on, remember that. Don't be too particular, because this is on the inside of your sleeve. It's going to be your binding piece. Not a lot of people are going to see this, so don't put too much effort to it. But if you're absolutely, you are the one that needs to be happy with what you're making. Now what we're doing is cut off as much as we can, but not too much, of course. I most of the time leave 1/4 of an inch seam allowance, not more, when I do it like this. And here we have it. And what you see now is you get a small ear here. You just cut that off. And here we have it. Now you do this twice and we have our binding piece. Let's get back to the tutorial. I am gonna insert a tag up somewhere in the corner of where I'm doing an instruction video for continuous bias binding. This pattern in particular, the Greer jumpsuit, it is quite short pieces of bias, so you can quite easily get this length of bias using the scraps you're having. But if you're doing a longer one and you're doing the neckline too, for example, you need a longer piece of bias binding. I would definitely suggest that you try this continuous bias binding, because it is fabric saving and it is so much easier. You don't have to connect all the seams like this. You do it in 2 seams, I think. And yeah, check it out if you haven't done it or if you haven't tried it. But otherwise, let's get back to the Greer jumpsuit sew along. Well, we're back at our jumpsuit, and what we have now is this binding piece. I have ironed it in half, so I've ironed it wrong sides together, so the right side is out. I didn't have enough fabric in this for the binding, so I'm using a some spare fabric that if I have a lot of fabric, not a lot of fabric, but if I have some fabrics left and that is possible to cut on the bias, I always do these kind of bias tapes leftover, so to speak, because you can always use them. And this is pure cotton, and I know that that will dye great if I want to dye these pants. So that is something to consider too. Think of that if you're using bias tape, that store-bought bias tape is often some polyester content in, and that won't dye as easy as pure cotton or linen or natural fibers. Just a thought. Now you use your binding. It's a single layer here, and then you fold it. So you're just using a double layer binding. And you start by pinning the raw side of the binding, which is the two folded pieces, not the fold itself, the two folded pieces. And you start off in one of the corners, either top front, left or right, or top back, left or right. It depends on where you want to start. And here we have the top, and I will start at my right hand, and then you start by putting a pin at the top corner. You see, here is the facing of the bib, the front bib. Here is the strap is coming through there. You put the binding raw sides to raw sides. You leave a little bit excess because it's easier that way. You put a pin there, but stick with me and I will show you why it's so important to be careful here. What you now have to check is that your strap isn't getting attached to the seam in some way that you're going to sew, because you're going to sew along the arm side here. You're going to sew here, it is 3/8 of an inch seam allowance instead of the other one we used. You're going to sew with 3/8 of an inch seam allowance, so you're going to sew as close as you can to the strap. I'm going to show it when I'm at the sewing machine too. But you don't want your strap to be in the way of the seam or getting caught in the seam. So I most of the time put it away, as far away as I can, when I'm doing it like this. And then you just start to sew. And I find it easiest not to pin too much, because when you're sewing it, you can feel how much stretch you need to put in this. You can see that it is some stretch in the bias tape, and that is because it's cut on the bias. But I don't pin it. I feel it at the sewing machine, and I think it's way easier. I just sew slow, and you just make sure that the raw edges is connected with the raw edges, so to speak. So let's get to the sewing machine and we will take it from there. Let's see where 3/8. 1, 2, 3. There we have the 3/8, and I put it so where my needle will be. And I can already see that it is not gonna follow any line or any presser foot. So then I will try and correct it by moving my sewing machine needle. If I move it like that, I end up way too much. No, if I put it like that, I can be using this line here. That is good. That is what I will do. So that is why I'm moving my needle all the time, because I have to adjust. Let's see. Now you have what I talked about before. Here you can see the facing of the bib, the front bib. Here you have the strap. Make sure you don't get the strap caught in the binding. But what you do want to do is sew as close to the strap as possible, because you want the seam to be as close to the strap as possible. So I'm going to move my needle a bit. And you see, raw ends to raw ends. And then I'm just gonna try and see where my seam, I think it's gonna be quite alright. Now it's gonna be a bit bumpy in the beginning because it is a lot of fabric to sew through. But just take it slow. backstitch. Make sure the strap is not in the way, and take your pin away, and off we go. And try to always, when you stop your machine, try to stop it with the needle down. And if you have that function on your machine, well, lucky you. Needle down is an amazing function on a sewing machine, I think. What you're seeing now is that the arm side is coming up. So we take it slowly and we put the raw edges from the binding to the raw edges of the side seam. And it almost feels natural how much stretch you're going to put into it, because it's just how much you want to be stretched under the arm, so to speak. And you can always maneuver the fabric, your jumpsuit fabric, too, underneath. You can see if I put it like that, it is way too much to the right. You just make sure it is just where it's supposed to be, lined up with that, and you sew slowly. And stop with the needle down. Here we go, a little bit of tension, not much. I just have to say, make sure you don't pull your fabric from behind. I'm only holding it to get the right placement of it. I'm not pulling it at all. Just wanted to add that. Now we're getting to the underarm seam. It's coming, you see, I put a little bit of tension, not much at all. Take it slowly. Now we're at the underarm seam. Now you have to, help it to form. You could iron this, press it while you're putting it in a round shape. I will add that to my bias binding footage, so you can see that. Then you prepare the fabric, so to speak. Now you have to be prepared to just adjust the fabric raw edge to raw edges. And stop with needle down. And if it isn't stopping with needle down, make sure you twist your shank to do it. And then we are just adjusting and keep on sewing. We're now coming towards the end, and here is the facing piece. Make sure it is folded over so that you see the wrong side of the facing before you attach your binding. Your binding is going to be attach the facing. The facing will be sandwiched in between. You see here a lot of raw edges. Here is the binding, here is the facing of the bib, and here is the actual jumpsuit, the front of the bib, no, back of the bib, sorry. And now you also have to make sure that you don't get stuck in the strap. A lot of things to think about, and if you want to here, you can put in a pin so you don't mess it up, but and then you just continue and backstitch. And we're finished with this side. Let's get over to the other camera and Now, let's continue sewing the other binding while we're here. That is the easiest way. Now we have sewn our bias tape and we are going to trim the seam allowances. This is what you're going to have in front of you now. You're going to have a lot of bias tape facing out like this. Here is the front bib. You see the bib facing. You see the wrong side of that. You see straps not attached anywhere else but on the top. Then you are doing everything right. What you're doing now is trim your seam allowance on the bias tape, of course. But I always start by trimming these. This is the corners. Do you see this corner here with the facing of the bib? You trim your binding and then you trim that. You see? You trim these corners like that. First you take away the unwanted binding, then you turn it around so you can see where your seam has gone, and you clip with an angle there. This is to get rid of all the bulk that will be here otherwise. I used to cut the extra strap pieces too that is sticking out from the binding, from the facing, but that is not necessary, but just a tip. Here we have the back side of the Greer jumpsuit. I start by cutting the binding. Make sure you don't get caught in anything else. And then you clip the corners of the bib with all the fabrics. And now we're going to trim the seam allowance down to almost 1 inch. No, 1/8 of an inch left. So it's going to be very little left. We'll try and share it with you like this. I'll try and zoom in. You see? It's not much left. Make sure you don't cut your jumpsuit because it is so easy to get the fabric caught. And this you do on both sides. I will speed up the other side. But this is what you should be left with. Not much seam allowance at all. Let's cut the other side. Now we have trimmed the seam allowances on the binding. What we are now going to do is press. It is not much left, as you can see. I have left a very tiny amount of binding here. Maybe I left a bit too small, I don't know. But you're going to press the seam allowance towards the binding, and then we're going to understitch as good as we can. We have to see if you probably should leave a bit more than I left, but let's see how it's working. What I normally do, and that is also something from my quilting time, is that I put the fabric, the main fabric here, let this binding stand up a bit, if you see, and then I will try and do it like this. Here you have the binding, here you have the fabric, and I leave it like this, and then I use the iron to do the work. I keep the iron pressed down, and can you see it is almost doing it, because it is so tiny. It's a bit harder, but it is almost doing the work itself. And there we go. Here you can see the seam allowance is going toward the binding. Not much, since, as I said, I didn't leave a lot of binding left in the seam allowance, but hey-ho. You can feel with your finger what way the seam allowance is going. I've done such a tiny piece, I need to have iron it from this side too. If you leave a little bit more than I do, you could get away with ironing it from right side up, but I can't. I was too good with the scissors, but never mind. I will add a top stitching element too, so it doesn't matter. It will keep its shape. What we now are going to do is understitch this too. And what you want, the best case scenario, is to catch your seam allowance. Understitching is sewing as close to the seam here as possible, but on the binding side. And the optimal thing is to catch this. But I don't know how well that will go with this narrow seam allowance, but we will see. Let's get to the sewing machine and we take it from there. If you have not tried this before, please do, because it is a game changer. Do you see this thing? It's looking a bit different from depending on what machine you're using, but on the Bernina it is looking like this. And you see, this is a metallic bar. I don't know the English word for it, but it has a sharp edge here, and you put this in the seam, in the middle of the seam, and then you will sew a straight line following the seam. So it is an amazing and helpful tool. I will try and zoom in when I am using it on, just change it out here. Let's see if we could, can you see? Here is that. And when I put my binding under the presser foot, I will try and go, let me see if I can zoom out one tiny bit. Here you can see. You see, this on the Bernina it's actually loose. On my faff it is stuck to the presser foot, so you can't move it. But then all you do is move your needle 1 or 2 positions to the right or to the left, depending on where you're binding or whatever it is you're sewing. Top stitching, it's another great feature for this. So yeah, I promise you, you will never go back once you've tried this one. I think I will sew it from this view so you can see, because now we need to catch this very, very tiny seam allowance. We need to be very close to it. I'm using 3.5 as a stitch length, and we're going to try and back. That is way too much to the right. Let me see. Here we go. Hope you can see. I follow this. I put this in the groove of the seam. And it is following it to a T. Let me show you from behind. Here. See? Perfect straight line. And it is actually catching some of my seam allowance. That is amazing. I don't know if you can see it there. There. You can almost, if you see that I'm almost tugging a bit, so that the fabric, since this is so far down in the groove, especially on the Bernina, it is, you could tug and pull the other way, so you open up the seam and the machine is doing the work for you. Don't have to backstitch, but I always do, to remember doing it from. I will continue with the, well, I can share with you. Here you see it from the front, and here you have it from the back. And you see it caught almost all of my seam allowance. Let's do the other side. Caught the seam allowance, and here it's from the right side. Now it's almost just the fun part left. Let's see. Now we take these front corners, you put your thumb inside it, put the binding between your thumb and your pointer finger, and you just do it like this. And you see, it is almost unfolding itself. And it is such a neat finish, right? I just love it. And do it thumbs in the corner, pointer finger at the binding, and fold over. And just a little tug on the strap. And here you have it. I just love this finish. You could top stitch this one down, and I think I'm going to do it because it is, the linen fabric isn't that, it's a bit too flowy, and even though I have some interfacing in it, it's still not great, so I will do that. But let's go to the back. Thumb in the corner, binding behind the pointer finger, and turn it over and pull and just tug. And without ironing or anything, almost a perfect finish from the beginning. Here we have it. Thumb, pointy finger, turn over. You're gonna be tired of me talking about that. Look, let's iron this and iron the facing to the wrong side. But let's start to iron the top of the bib where the facing is folded over, and it gets such neat finish. It is looking so good, I think. Let's take the back facing piece, and here we have it. Thanks to the understitching, it is helping itself to lay flat. And I don't know if you see it already, but the understitching on the binding helps the binding to turn in too. You see, it is almost, it's wanting to be on the inside. Let's just top stitch. You almost could leave that and just either hand stitch or baste if you don't want the line on the outside, but I really like that top stitching line, so I will be top stitching. I will actually start here, sew like that, sew down the facing piece here somewhere, so I leave it like that, and continue around. So I will sew it in a round. I will show you on my sewing machine. As I did before, I will check from the wrong side where I want my seam to end up. Here we have where I want my stitches, I mean. Here we have it close to the edge of the presser foot, and if I sew it there, I will end up there. That is a bit too much in the middle of the binding. I want one step, 2 steps to the left, I think. And now I will sew it from right side, because I know where I will end up. And that is one more tip. And I will start here at the bottom of the facing, so to speak, so I know where the, yeah, I will. Here we go, and make sure you're keeping this end close to the presser foot. And now I'm using 3.5 stitch length. And off we go. Now we are getting close to the facing part, and you see here is where the facing is starting. So I will try and sew up to this, and then I will pivot. I can feel it in my... I feel it with the finger holding it there. It's so thick. And now I will try and sew it in line with that. I'm lucky, I get that line. See, so I will try and keep it down like that. And then we know we will end up somewhat right. Otherwise you put painter's tape here, but I'm just a bit lazy now. I want to try them. Pivot, and let's go the other arm side. And now we are soon reaching the facing part, and you just go slowly and feel where the edge is going. And there it was, and I missed it. Yeah, you see, it's just the same amount of distance. It should be. I'm really lazy at this moment. I'm so sorry. And here we have to meet up to that, so you have to stretch it maybe a tiny bit. Especially since this fabric is so shifty for being such a solid fabric. And there we go. We have top stitched. Ta-da! Just pressing needed, and this won't be so visible once I'm dyeing this fabric black, as you probably can guess. But let's press this and then try them on. Okay, I'm in love. This is where the pocket were supposed to be, but I think I'm gonna lowering it. I don't know if you can see it that well. It's a very bad angle, but I think I'm gonna lowering it for at least 1 inch, and I hope that's okay. Yeah, I love the fit of these. As I said, I sized down. I should be in a 12, but I sized down to a 10, and I think I think it's perfect. I will take the pockets away because I will absolutely add them. I thought about adding them on the back, and that is an option, but yeah, I think I have more use of them in the front because they are still usable pockets. So yeah, I will keep them like that. And I was actually thinking about leaving this length, but I think it is just a smidge too short, and I didn't have more fabric. So now I'm thinking about maybe I should take them off to shorts anyway. They will be shorts. I will take them off. I see that now. I can make myself another pair. It's so easy. It's such an easy make. Yeah. Well, I love the finishes. As you can see here, I just love my Greer jumpsuits. And yeah, if you haven't tried it, please try it. I will attach the pockets now, and I will hem them, so we will meet back at the sewing machine. Well, let's attach the pocket and then hemming it, and we are finished. I am cheating when I am attaching pockets, if you call it cheating. I'm using steam seam. It is, I think it is for quilting from the beginning, but I love it. I order it from the US, so it's quite expensive for me, but it's worth it. Every penny of it. It is paper on one side and glue on one side. Put it down like this. It's quite sticky before you even iron it, so Here we have the 2 pockets with steamer seam on both of them, attached to both of them. And then you take away the paper side, I mean, carefully, so you don't take away the gluey part too. And if you feel on it, touch it, you feel that it is a bit sticky. That is one. And then we have the second one. But this is a game changer for me. I started using it when I was just sewing bags. And it was such an amazing product. Let's see where my pockets were supposed to be. I just have to add that if you don't have a steamer seam tape or a wonder tape or something like that, of course you can just pin it or mark it with a crayon and a chalk or something like that, and you can follow that line while you're sewing. I left a pin where they were supposed to be according to the pattern, and as you saw on my fitting video, I wanted them to be about 1 inch lower, or maybe 1.5, 2 inches lower. So we will see. Hope you can see it. Here is my mark for where they're supposed to be on the pattern, and they are quite far out, as we talked about before, but here is where they're supposed to be. Now I'm going to lower it 1.5 inch at least. There, maybe, and I will just see that it is quite straight, as straight as possible to this line. Yeah, and then you just gently press this. Feel like there is no puckering inside. Tug around the fabric, and here we go. And once you iron it, then it adheres properly to the fabric. And now you're even. According to the information about this project, you're supposed to be able to wash it, I think, but I never tried that, and I will definitely not do that. Let's see if we can get the other pocket in place. Let's poke the threads under and see, somewhere like this. The jumpsuit is still that oversight that it doesn't matter if it is a bit uneven. Now the seam seems great like that. And yeah, I use the middle, this seam, and just make sure that it is according to that. And I press by hand, and then I use the iron. And now we're gonna attach it. And I think I'm gonna sew 2 lines of stitching. One very close to the edge, about 1/8 of an inch away. And then one maybe, I will use my edge foot, so you can see that in use too, regarding the top stitching feature. Let's go over to that. Let's use our edge foot again and top stitch some, or stitch in the ditch foot, that is what it's called. Here we go. And let's see. I want a seam 1/8 of an inch beside the pocket outer liner, so to speak. And I hope you can see now. Here we have the thingy, and here is my sewing needle, and I think it will be pretty bang on there. And now I will hold this edge close to my outline all the time, so it will be a straight line. And it is an amazing foot, so please try it. I will go around this once and then go back the same way. What I now most of the time do once when I'm sewing pockets is put the needle down, then I turn it around like I am I'm gonna create a not a square, a triangle here. I sew a couple of stitches, or I hand shank 2 stitches along the top line of the pocket, pivot again, and now I am sewing you just have to help this one, since it is so, it's digging down my edge foot, and that is the only tricky part with it, but it doesn't matter. And now you are sewing a slightly slant, so you will get down to here somewhere. Line, slightly slant line. That was tough. I need 3 stitches. This isn't the easiest thing with an edge foot, I'm realizing, because it is gripping the fabric, but can you see I'm not sewing it completely straight now. I will share it with you later what I'm doing. Down to this line where the facing, where we secured the facing. And now I'm gonna sew using this as a guideline, so it's very close to the other line. But I like the look of it, and it is securing the pocket. When you came from this way, you have to, once you get to that line where you want your triangle to start, so to speak, you have to twist a little bit and turn so you get your machine to sew slant on the other way here. You see, it's not even. And then you just hand shank till you get almost to the top. And then you pivot and I will share with you how it turned out. Here you can see corner and another corner. I will sew the other pocket off cam because it's just the same. Okay, 2 pockets done. What we now have left is hemming, then they're finished. And I thought I was going to get away with using these as 3/4 lengths, but they are too short, as you saw in my video. So I'm going to take out the pattern piece, see where the crotch seam is approximately, and here she tells us to cut off the short. I'm going to add 1 inch to that too, to make sure that I don't cut it too short. Too short shorts. and then I'm gonna put them together. Gonna see where the crotch seam is, and I'm gonna, you know, fold them at the crotch, and then take both leg pieces and do like this, shake, put it like this so I can see that it is even somewhat and nothing is puckering or something like that beneath, because it is a slippery fabric, this fabric. That is definitely something I realized. Now let's find the mark I made. Okay, here we have it. Let's see where the ruler is, one of the rulers. Here we have a ruler that we can use. Where was the mark? There it was. Somewhere around that mark. And you can't, this seam is not straight, so you can't follow that if you have a straight ruler. You have to use something that is, I hope you can see some of this. You put this and from the pocket is supposed to be a straight line, so make sure that it is somewhat straight, the line you're cutting. And I'm cutting it at 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 inches from the pocket and keeping it that. Oops. There. It's approximately right, and I just have to feel that the pockets, no, that was unlucky. I have to make sure that the pockets are aligned when I'm using that as a reference point. Let's double check it again. About 7. Here we have it. And here we have it, yeah. Now I should be using this rotary cutter, but I can't since it is on this mat. I am going to hem 1 inch up. So what we do is, this is a 2-inch ruler, the width is 2 inch. So what I do first is to mark 2 inch up instead of 1 inch. If you have seen my videos before, you know why, but if you haven't, please be patient and I will show it. Here we have it. I hope you can see the line. I'll try and focus it. No, you probably won't see it. We'll try and zoom even more, but here is a faint line. What we do now is we fold up to that line. See? It's much easier to draw a line at 1 inch and try to see that. Here we have it. And here we have it. And this you do all the way around this leg and all the way around the other leg. Now we have folded both legs one time. Now what you do is you lift the hem that you just folded and you just turn it under, so to speak. And then you iron that one too and press that one too. And then we will sew the last bit of stitching of this jumpsuit. Take it piece by piece. pressed both hems, and now we're gonna finish this jumpsuit off by top stitching the hem on this side. You could hand slip stitch if you don't want the seam to be shown, but I think this is the kind of jumpsuit that it doesn't matter at all. And especially once again we check where this will be okay to sew if we sewed it on the wrong side, and I think I'm gonna be at that line, and I'm gonna keep the needle as far to the left as I can. And here we go. And the stitch length is 3.5. And here we are. And here we have them finished, hemmed, and ready to start using. I will give them a final press, and then I will try them on and show you and see how I will go about this, if I'm gonna dye them black or if I'm gonna keep them. I think I'm leaning towards dyeing them at least grey, so that they will match my capsule and my module this time. But we'll see, maybe the grey won't cover the brown patches, and then it is better to dye them as light black as possible. That usually turns out pretty grey, so to speak. But off to the ironing board, and yeah, we're finished. Well done. I will see you with them on.